everyone, it's Daria. Welcome back to my channel full of lit, and long time no see, guys. I took a little bit of a break that turned into a really long break of about 3 months. I took the break for mental health reasons, academic reasons, other personal reasons, basically every single reason you could possibly have that would require you to take a break from social media, I had. And now I'm back, and while I would so love to tell you guys that I have super innovative ideas and lots of creative videos planned in the upcoming weeks, I actually don't. So I'm just gonna do a tag video. So today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book Freakout tag. I will link the original creators of the tag in the description below, but without further ado, let's get started. So the first question is the best book that you've read so far in 2019, and for me, there can be no other answer besides King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. I've seen this book pop up in a few people's mid-year book Freakout tags. It usually falls under the category of biggest disappointment, but obviously that does not apply to me. I'll link my review of this book in the description below, but what it comes down to is that I'm just a sucker for Zoya and Nikolai individually and together, and that is really why I enjoyed this book. Like, I would like to say that I really enjoyed the plot, or that the plot twists were really great, or that the villains were extremely intriguing, or whatever, all that shit that you're supposed to say. But honestly, this book just made my shipper heart very happy. When I think about King of Scars, the only thing that really comes to mind is Zoya and Nikolai and their shared trauma, and I just, it's beautiful. The second question is the best sequel you've read so far in 2019, and once again, it has to be given to Miss Leigh Bardugo with Crooked Kingdom. I just enjoyed this book so much more than Six of Crows, honestly. I felt like Six of Crows was kind of just this really long prologue for this book. With Six of Crows, it took me a really long time to kind of get invested in some of the characters and in the heist, but with this one, it's just action and desperation and high stakes from the very first page. I'm just a really big fan of endings, honestly, and I'm a big fan of endings that are well done, that wrap up the plot, that tie up the loose ends, that answer all the burning questions that you have. And it honestly sounds like it should be an easy thing to do, to be able to deliver a satisfying ending to your readers and your audience, but apparently it's not, especially with fantasy. I like to see characters grow and change and yet also staying true to their core values at the same time. Which makes me appreciate this book that much more, because even if I was heartbroken by the things that happened to some characters, I understood why they happened. It made sense with the character growth, it made sense with the plot, and I just appreciate Leigh Bardugo so much for getting me that, because some people couldn't. Next up, you have to pick a new release from 2019 that you haven't read yet but really want to, and for this prompt, I picked Girls on the Verge. This is an art copy that was sent to me by Madeline. I still have not read it. It is sitting there on my bedside table. I look at it pretty much every night, and then I pass over it pretty much every night. So this book follows Camille, who recruits her best friend and a random girl from her theater group to come with her on a road trip so they can drive to a clinic and Camille can terminate her unwanted pregnancy. So many people that I love and whose opinions I trust are still raving about this book even though it's been months since its release. I've heard it's funny as hell, that it's poignant, that it's very important for the times that we live in, and it's also really short, like 220 pages, and I really appreciate that. So next you have to choose a release from the second half of the year that you are most excited to get to, and for me, it is Well Met by Jen DeLuca. The book follows Emily, who is really into this whole Renaissance fair shit, and her apparent arch nemesis Simon, who couldn't give a shit about it, despite the fact that his parents owned the fair. Obviously, we've got the whole enemies to lovers type thing, or just, begrudging tolerance and annoyance to lovers type thing. Honestly, I don't even know if romances and contemporaries can do like a proper enemies to lovers, at least in the way I think about it, because I think enemies to lovers, it's gotta be like really high stakes, and that usually comes with like epic fantasies more. Like when I think enemies to lovers in contemporary novels and romance novels, I think it's more along the lines of like you're just annoyed and frustrated with each other, or something happened in the past, you have the wrong perception of one another, and then that perception changes, and now I want to bone, and I also love you. Like, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Anyway, I'm just really excited for this book because I have never read a romance novel, or really any novel that's been set in a Renaissance fair, and that's such a unique setting, and I think it'll be really interesting to follow characters that are working behind the scenes of the event, and we can see all the ins and outs. The next question is the biggest disappointment of 2019 thus far. This is a very easy answer for me, and it is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you're gonna put a character's name in the title, I feel like you should at least make sure that character's good? And I don't mean good as in they're a good person, I just mean don't make them the most insufferable person I've ever had the misfortune to read about. Every single character in this book was superior to Daisy. And I honestly just wish that this book had focused on literally anybody else. I wish that this book had focused a bit more on Camilla. I thought that her journey was so interesting. She was such a phenomenal and strong character. I would have loved to have known more about her. Likewise, I would have loved to have known more about Karen. I think the most powerful moment between women, the most powerful feminist moment in this novel is when Camilla and Karen go together to terminate Karen's pregnancy. And Simone! Oh my god, why was there so little of Simone? It was like her only function was to be Daisy's caregiver and support and best friend. Like, that was her only point for existing. And the other thing that pissed me off so much about Daisy Jones, the character, this is a huge spoiler, so go away if you don't want to hear it. There was a point in time where Daisy and Billy were both at odds with one another. Daisy, one night, when she is drunk, spills all of Billy's secrets and past transgressions to this reporter. She talks about his drinking and alcoholism when he went to rehab. She talks heavily about the fact that he was cheating on his wife all the time when they were on the road. So yeah, she basically ruins everything for Billy and for, more specifically, his family, his wife, and his daughter, because years down the line when his daughter finally gets old enough, she's going to read all of these tabloids about her father cheating on her mother. She's going to hear gossip and rumors about her father's alcoholism, and he's not going to get the opportunity to tell her his story and his mistakes on his own terms. Daisy took that away from them. So then in retaliation, Billy goes and he tells a reporter, Daisy and I don't get along, I hate her, and then that becomes a huge scandal. But my issue is that Daisy and everybody else in the novel equated what Daisy said to what Billy said. And I'm sorry, but those things are just, they're not on the same level. They're just not. What Daisy said could potentially ruin an entire family and multiple people's lives. What Billy said basically just gave them more publicity. So in conclusion, I did not like Daisy Jones, the book, or the character. Next up is the biggest surprise of 2019, and for me, that has to be The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. This is an adult fantasy. It focuses on this tournament in which the Savior's husband is chosen from a large group of men chosen from all different castes and classes in the society. The Savior is this magical woman who, with her powers, sort of keeps the peace and prosperity in the land. Our main character, Tobias, enters the tournament and he wants nothing to do with the Savior. He is only there for his own personal reasons. I was very surprised with how much I enjoyed this novel. I was really afraid that I was going to go into it and feel kind of torn because I'm a huge fan of Jenna, but then it can kind of suck when someone that you love creates something that you're not a huge fan of. But I was honestly very surprised by how much I enjoyed this. There was a huge cast of characters, and I thought that it was very impressive that every single one felt three-dimensional, felt like they were an actual person rather than just a stereotype or an archetype. The action sequences were really interesting, and it felt high stakes the entire time. Obviously, this is a tournament to the death. People are dying left and right, and they die very quickly and very brutally. I felt the tension the entire time, and that's what you want from a book like this. And while the plot twist at the end wasn't a complete surprise to me, I kind of had some seeds planted in my head that that might be where the novel was going. I think it sets up the sequel very, very well, and it just makes me that much more excited to pick it up. Next is your favorite new author, and this author is new to me. It is L.J. Shen, who wrote the Sinners of Saints series. I read all 4 books in this series back to back. I enjoyed them immensely. I honestly really have to thank my great friend Chandler for introducing me not only to the series but to this author. L.J. Shen sure as hell knows how to write a romance hero, okay? And forget everything I said earlier in this video about contemporary and romance novels not being able to pull off high stakes enemies to lovers, because Vicious is on another fucking level. I'm very excited about this author because she is coming out with a spin-off of the Sinners of Saints series focusing on all the guys' kids. I have heard from Chandler that the first one was a little bit disappointing, which is a huge bummer for me because the main character has the same name as me, and I was very, very excited to read that book, and now apparently it's not that good. But you know what? L.J. Shen, this series, still a favorite. Next up, we have Newest Fictional Crush, and honestly, neither of these are necessarily new, but I did read the books about them for the first time in my life and just sort of fell in love. And those two gentlemen are Jon Snow and the Darkling. Now, I already knew Jon Snow. Everybody knows Jon Snow from the show, okay? But for the first time this year, I read A Game of Thrones, the novel, and my love for this boy, it just increased. Okay, I just said boy, and I am now remembering that this kid is 14 fucking years old in the book, and now I feel like I can't put him in this fictional crush category. We're going to demote him to fictional child that I love and will protect. See, it's really hard for me to read these books because I keep imagining the actors who are in their 20s and 30s when they're doing the show, but in reality, they are literal children in the novel. And then next, of course, is the Darkling, and I feel like I don't even have to explain this to you guys. Like, you get it. You get it. And honestly, maybe that says something about me, okay? And all of us who are part of the Darkling cult, maybe there's something wrong with us because we are full on standing a 1,000-year-old man who just kills people and children for no reason. But you know what? I can't. He has dark hair and a sharp jawline. What the fuck am I supposed to do? Next is newest favorite character, and honestly, this could go to no one else besides Zoya Nazielensky. If you want to hear all my incoherent thoughts about how much I love Zoya Nazielensky, once again, King of Scars review in the description below, but it basically all boils down to the fact that she is a stone cold bitch, and I would let her murder me. So next you have to name a book that made you cry. There were a few this year, honestly, but I don't think any one hit me as hard as The Rape of Nanking. This is a nonfiction novel written by Iris Chang. I actually heard about this book from a mentor of mine. Iris Chang actually lives in the area where I have grown up, which surprised me and intrigued me and made me want to read this novel because I had never heard about this atrocity before. This novel follows the 1937 Japanese invasion of Nanking and the subsequent brutalization, murder, and systemic rape of the entire population of the city. The introduction talks a bit about why this atrocity and event has been kept so silent for so long and why a lot of people don't necessarily know about it. The book talks about 3 foreigners who were living in Nanking at the time who tried to do their best to help a lot of the population that were living there. It then has a section about the murders and brutalization of the Japanese men. And then, of course, there is a section that is dedicated entirely to the rape of the women and girls in the city. Yeah, the book is very detailed. It's very, very detailed about what happened to these people, these children, these elders even, and it's a really difficult thing to read about. And it's really painful. It's really painful to read about, and it's painful to think and know that that actually happened. And I cried a lot. I cried a lot, and I honestly don't think I would have been able to push through it if I hadn't been listening to it on audio. I think it's a phenomenally written book about a horrific tragedy, and I'm sure it makes sense why I cried. Next is to pick a book that made you happy, and there are honestly so many that I could choose from, but for this one I decided to go with Bloom by Kevin Panetta. I read this graphic novel very recently and I just absolutely adored it. I loved every single page of it. It was such a quick read, which I think also added to my enjoyment. There's just something so nice about being able to sit down in one spot and finish a book within the span of like 30 minutes or an hour. Let's be honest, it was probably an hour. It's a pretty thick graphic novel. The story follows Ari, who is a young teenage boy. He is living in a small seaside town with his family who owns a bakery, and he absolutely does not want to be there. He wants to go and live in another more metropolitan city with his friends and rent an apartment, but his father and his mother tell him that he has to stay behind because their family business is running out of time, they don't have a lot of money, they have to make ends meet, and Ari has to stay. Ari is obviously not a fan of this plan, but then his mind starts to change when he meets a young baker connoisseur. I don't know what the fuck the word is. His name's Hector, and he's adorable. I really identified with Ari's frustration and anger at being stuck in a situation that he did not want or plan for simply because there are circumstances out of his control. I also really liked and also kind of identified with Hector's optimism about life. There was something about looking at pages upon pages of this very cool blue color that just kind of made me feel like really good inside. It was just perfect. It was exactly what I needed at the time when I read it, and I just love it. So now I'm meant to show you guys the most beautiful books that I bought or received this year. The first one is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and then The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. Both these covers are stunning, and honestly, I don't know what it is about fantasy covers this year. They are just doing it right. If I had to write a book, I would write a fantasy novel just so I could have a pretty cover. Alright, so last but not least, the final question is, what books do you still need to get to by the end of this year? And there are so many, like literally too many that I would not be able to name all of them, but I'm going to prioritize reading Carry On On and A Lesson in Thorns. I'm prioritizing Carry On because now everybody's talking about Wayward Son and I want to know what the fuck is happening. Also, I've heard that this book is the gay version of Harry Potter, which already makes it the better version of Harry Potter. As for A Lesson in Thorns, I don't know what the fuck happened. I don't know what was in the water, but suddenly this book was everywhere. My book Twitter TL was filled with people talking about this book. The only thing I know about this book is that it is wild as hell. I don't even know what the plot is. I don't know who the characters are. I just know that there is tons of amazing rep in it. So I am definitely gonna be reading this sometime very soon. So that's it for me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know how you're doing because it's been so long. Also, let me know if you have read or plan on reading any of the books that I mentioned. I would love to know. As always, my social media links are in the description below, so check those out if you would like, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!